I think that fiction writing is just a different muscle than joke writing, and it's great to be able to exercise that muscle. And I've written 3 novels, and I never thought I could write one. And
it's such a different form. You're writing one-liners, and when you were doing stand-up as well, even if you wrote a joke, it was 4 lines before you get to the punchline. And here you have to write something that can carry across a couple of hundred pages.
Absolutely. And my first book, which wasn't published, my first novel was called Who Listens, which is a joke about 2 shrinks. Which, if we have time, I'll tell it later.
You really are into help and shrinks.
Yeah, well, they're in just
your
about every
material.
one. Yeah, and because, well, why not? I mean, use it or lose it. It's there. And my first book, I couldn't get it published because people would say this is hilarious. How about a plot? And basically, what I was doing was knitting jokes for 200 or 300 pages. And so, I thought that, where's the plot? I thought that was a little nitpicky, but I decided, well, okay, I'll put in a plot. And so I've written 3 books with plots. But the difference with joke writing, that's just piecework. That's, set up, punch, move on, and do a volume business. And with fiction, you have to get in a state of mind where you're in this place with these characters, and if the path leads to a good line or a joke, okay. But if it doesn't, then go down that path.
When you're writing, you have to come up with other voices, right? Now, does the voice lead to humor? If you come up with the wrong voice, you wind up not writing funny things?
I think so, and I think that you really have to ask yourself, who is this character like that I know? So how can I access who this character is? And is what this character is saying and doing plausible? Not necessarily realistic, but plausible.
Phil is a retired sports writer who writes what he intends to be a spoof of self-help
right.
books, and then it takes off as the real thing?
The world takes it seriously. He writes it under an assumed name because he's a little embarrassed by it. He writes it under the name Marty Fleck, and the book becomes an international bestseller, and Marty Fleck becomes this self-help guru. And, Phil never really capitalizes on that because he is kind of embarrassed by the whole thing that was meant to be a goof. But he retains this twice-a-week newspaper column called Baggage Handling, written by Marty Fleck. And what happens is all is well, except Phil is stricken with this limp that comes from nowhere, born of nothing. There's nothing physically wrong with him, and he's in constant pain. And he actually is eventually delivered from that pain by a legitimate self-help guru, a guy named Samuel O'Brien,
who has written a book called The Power of O.
Power of Ow, yes.
Ow. Do you find yourself laughing out loud when you read self-help books?
No, because look, I'm desperate and as insecure as the next guy.
So you actually read them for some kind of help?
I have
guidance?
Read them, but I've read so many that I am on to them. So
you read them for research, or you read them because you were reading them and it turned out to be research?
I read them because they were recommended, and then it turned out to be research. And this raises an interesting point. This book was born out of absolute personal experience because I dragged a foot. I had a limp for 3.5 years, and it was unexplained. There was nothing physically wrong with me. It would come and go. It would jump around. And I sought this guy who pioneered the theory of psychogenic pain, and it helped me. And
we used to call it psychosomatic.
Right, but yeah, it used to call it psychosomatic. Psychogenic means that the mind is really feeding the body here. So what happened was I wrote this book to try and art myself out of the pain. This is what I did. I figured, well, what if I write a book about a guy with a limp who can't get rid of this psychosomatic limp? Maybe in there I'll get to the bottom of why I'm limping and why I'm in pain. Well, son of a gun, the guy in the book gets better before I do. I finish the book, and I'm still in pain. The guy in the book is better. 10 days after I sell the book, I go to yet another doctor. takes one look at my most recent X-ray and says to me, "You need a hip replacement."
So you really did have pain.
I really did have legitimate. He said, "I'm not saying you should get one. I'm saying you have to get one. This is a no-brainer, and you'll be completely out of pain." And
so you'd been misdiagnosed all those years?
I'd been misdiagnosed, and people say to me, "Aren't you furious that you went down this path for years?" And hey, look, I don't get the book out of this if I don't go on this path. So, the journey is the destination.
One of the cliches of this kind of interview is, how autobiographical is your novel? And I wouldn't have asked you that question, and it turns out...
Well, that's why I'm here.
Turns out this is more
what a break
autobiographical.
that I was here to shed light on that.